The story begins one late afternoon when a young woman named Kurihara is unexpectedly summoned by Professor Koshiro, an unusual occurrence as he has not contacted her in a long time. When she arrives, the professor brings up a former classmate of hers, Sadai Mitsuomi, and quietly hands her a letter he received from him. Confused and uneasy, Kurihara hesitates before opening it. What she reads leaves her stunned. Sadai is expressing a resolve to end his own life. Meanwhile, Sadai himself is walking alone through a dense forest, lost in thought. His mind lingers on the letter he has written to Professor Koshiro, as though each step further into the woods pulls him deeper into his decision. In that letter, he thanked him for the kindness he had shown several times. He keeps delving through the woods, and then comes across a temple, lined with several statues. He finds one of the statue's heads coming off its body, so he quickly fixes it and then prays earnestly. He recalls the letter again in which he had asked his forgiveness for not living up to his expectations and had apprehensively requested him to receive his insurance payout. It appears that the forest lies in a majestic mountainous area, and when he gets exhausted from trotting through it, he settles down under a gigantic tree, desperately swaying his phone sideways to catch signals. The frustrated man is unable to find the suicide manual that he bookmarked earlier, and frets more when the realization strikes him about the disabled GPS. He is worried that without GPS, his body would be lost in the middle of the mountains, canceling the insurance payout. Then he thinks of climbing the gigantic tree to catch a stronger signal. But the magnanimous size of the tree is enough to change his mind as he decides to settle down and be content with enriching that tree with his remains. He lies there and is about to doze off when he is suddenly awakened by a strange rustling sound. He is shocked to see a young girl standing on a step stool, tying a noose off a tree branch. The mountain was apparently hosting multiple bad decisions that day. Instantly, her self-harming intentions dawn on him, and he swiftly dashes towards her. He grabs her from behind and then throws himself on the ground, taking her along. He gently places her on the ground, but reprimands her actions hysterically, giving her a piece of his mind. The girl just stares back at him in a stupor, and her unresponsiveness irks him further. With widened eyes, the girl places her hands on his chest and then tries to confirm whether he is Ukami-sama. He came to the forest with questions and immediately received more. An astonished Sadai denies being something so prominent and describes himself as an ordinary salaryman. Soon, she can be seen inside the temple's sanctuary, settled down saucily on a mat and pompously smoking a cigarette. Meanwhile, he can be seen in a dojiza to her sheer amusement. She laughs softly at his misunderstanding. He had thought she was about to end her life, but in reality, she was just drying sweet potatoes. He apologizes to her repeatedly to the extent of her frustration. Sadai apologized enough times to qualify as a customer service representative. She assures him of having no ill will against him and lauds his intention to save her life. A bashful Sadai expresses his gratitude for her kindness. He is definitely mesmerized by her regal presence despite appearing no older than a middle schooler. He cannot help inquiring about her presence at such a place, to which she claims that the place is her home. He is taken aback to find a little girl living in an abandoned village. At this point, normal explanations had already left the chat. Next, he inquires about her parents by looking here and there. For a moment, the little girl is surprised, but then bursts into cackles. To his immense shock, she reveals that it has been 8 centuries since she last saw them. She coyly reveals herself to be an elderly woman despite appearing like a child. Next, she terms herself as another Yaobakuni, who attained immortality by eating a mermaid's flesh. Most people age gracefully. She simply skipped the process. Sadai is left thunderstruck, but the latter keeps on smoking nonchalantly. She mentions being devoted to her husband, an Ukami of the mountain, for nearly 8 centuries. Sadai finds her to the height of lunacy when she claims to be fiercely devoted to a god. She uncovers how the Ukami left her as his only survivor after the village became deserted. A panic-stricken Sadai makes quick calculations in her mind and declares her a widow in simple terms. He quickly puts the brake on her chatter and then processes the whole information in his head. Next, he retells her story in chronological order and, to her great delight, openly refers to her as a widow. However, he remembers that she had originally addressed him as Ukami-sama. This makes him wonder whether she is still sincerely waiting for her husband's return and whether she has not yet recognized what he looks like. She gravely proclaims being devoted to a mountain spirit and is completely clueless about his physical appearance. Sadai expresses astonishment at that bizarre notion, but she claims that to be her duty. Seeing his bewilderment, she doesn't expect him to believe her instantly, but he assures her that he actually does, since he has no choice but to believe her. He even quotes his professor to support his POV that some things are not proved by modern science. However, their existence cannot be denied. The girl jiggles, finding him a bizarre person, and then inquires about the reason for his deep mountain adventure. A flabbergasted Sadai scratches himself nervously and then begins to stutter. The girl immediately guesses that this wanderer might have lost his way, and he doesn't try to correct her. Warning him about the mountain's nightfall's perils, she offers to accompany him towards a human dwelling, but he suggests looking around for a bit longer. Sensing that the man is free, she quickly asks for his help with a chore he had interrupted earlier, choosing him for the task because of his tall stature. Though nervous, he agrees. In the next moment, he is assisting her in drying sweet potatoes while she instructs him on the finer details of the work. Sitting nearby on a wall, she watches him with a bright, cheerful smile. He pauses for a moment, glancing back over his shoulder, sweat beading on his face. Inside, he is overwhelmed by emotional turmoil in her presence. Unable to stop himself from stealing glances at her, she remarks admirably on his hard work and towering height. He expresses his gratitude and then looks at her inquisitively. The potatoes were drying faster than his ability to stay calm. On her encouragement, he expresses curiosity about the time the village was abandoned, since most of the place has already turned into a forest. The girl calculates mentally and then states that it has been a century and a half. He is shocked to learn that all this time, this weird woman has spent in isolation. The little woman explains how people found the nearby towns more convenient than the rustic life of a village. She mentions another cause being the lack of fragrant wood harvesting, which led their prized carpenters to leave the village since their artistic craft couldn't be passed to future generations. Urban migration was apparently defeating immortality. Some loyal villagers chose to remain, but they were unable to escape the effects of aging. It is revealed that she has been alone since the last villager died some 150 years ago. Sadai's mind drifts off to the past, where he is standing beside a dead body, and the following grief that lingered around him for 3 years. He cannot believe that this outlandish person has suffered 50 times more than he has. Tears begin to flow liberally on his cheeks, thinking about her pain. Sadai arrived prepared for one emotional crisis and got several. The girl instantly jumps over him, catching him off guard, staring at him in stupor. She cannot believe that this grown man is crying for her, but he instantly apologizes and composes himself. Next, she lists down the reason he gave her the impression of being her Ukami-sama on their first meeting. Their faces are just a few centimeters away when she expresses a desire to have a kind man like him as her husband. Sadai is mesmerized by her beauty and finds himself admitting that a wife like her can be a breakthrough in one's life. His mouth once again submitted thoughts that were supposed to stay internal. She gazes at him, completely dumbstruck, and it is then that the panic-stricken Sadai bites his tongue. In a fit of excitement, she pins him to the ground and then lands smoothly. Their eyes lock with each other in a stupor, and then he frantically apologizes to her. Ignoring his wails, she tries to confirm his earlier statement about having her as his wife. He turns as red as a tomato from embarrassment and blames his slippery tongue for so clumsily revealing his thoughts. The tongue was rapidly becoming the main antagonist of the story. Her eyes twinkling mysteriously, she expectantly tries to confirm whether their affection is mutual. Sadai is too abashed to respond, so she slowly pulls herself away from him. He is thunderstruck when he learns that she is already aware of his suicidal intentions, as she wonders whether their union will put an end to that. She cryptically smiles at his deeply shocked expression, and then addresses him by his name, Mitsuomi. Sadai cannot still believe the turn of events on his supposedly last day. The day's schedule had clearly drifted far from the original plan. As she offers him her hand, he apprehensively inquires about her name. She introduces herself as Aika, and then, upon inquiring, he jitterly introduces himself as Sadai Mitsuomi. Later, when she lays a feast for him, he is taken aback since it has been ages since he has had a meal like that, and his hands instantly join together in gratitude. She insists he help himself, and thanks him for helping her with the chores. Despite the sumptuous food in front of him, Sadai is reluctant to have it since he isn't used to such delicious homemade meals for ages. Looking at her eager face, he doesn't have the heart to refuse her, and finds himself in hot water after over 2 decades. After observing him for a moment, she encourages him to eat the special leafy greens that are freshly picked. Sadai looked more nervous about dinner than he was about wandering into a mysterious mountain village. She mentions their harvest being quite rare and that he is lucky to have such an exclusive delicacy. He nervously pops in the greens but is panic-stricken since he is unable to feel their taste. Next, she points at the vegetables and freshwater fish, all cooked specially. He cannot believe that all the food is grown and caught by her. She assures him that although the food is not as exquisite as the one in big cities, it is healthy and nourishing. A stunned Sadai then takes a dig at the fish, but she tells him how to eat an otherwise leathery fish with a special sauce. As the gravy breaks down the fish to tenderness, Sadai breathes in the aromatic fragrance. Before presenting him with the piping hot bowl, she blows on it to cool it off. Instantly, Sadai's mind drifts off to his childhood times when his mother used to take care of him just like that. He unconsciously envisions his mother's face in hers as she presents him with the bowl. One bowl of soup accomplished what years of therapy probably could not. Flushed with emotion, he accepts it and then slurps down its contents. Unable to take it anymore, his eyes well up, and tears begin to roll down freely on his cheek. She anxiously touches his shoulder, thinking that the soup was not cool enough, but he takes off his glasses to reveal overflowing rivers of emotion that he is unable to control after tasting something so delicious. Aika comforts him that he can have this dish as many times as he wants. He continues eating the dish with teary eyes while she watches him, amused, since it has been almost a century since someone ate her cooking, and the thought fills her heart with immense joy. Sadai knows her awareness of the real reason for his crying, and yet she is humble enough not to mention it. He admits to her immense kindness and her big heart. Once he is done with the meal, he bows in a dojiza in front of her to offer his gratitude. She then informs him about a nearby hot water spring to freshen himself. He is surprised to learn about a spring in an abandoned village, but she pushes him towards it. Apparently, the hospitality package included food, comfort, and a spa treatment. He apprehensively follows her instructions and walks uncertainly on her guided path, only to come across a serene spring generating misty fumes. He quickly dips himself inside it to enjoy the luxurious open-air bath. He takes off his glasses to fully enjoy the beautiful star-studded sky and recalls Aika's delicious home-cooked food, the simple luxuries he had long forgotten. He is surprised at the sudden turn of things, from intending to lose his life to instead gaining long-lost memories. He splashes some water on his face and is still spaced out when, suddenly, a dainty foot splashes beside him. He nearly gets a heart attack on Aika's unexpected arrival, offering him to enjoy the night over some drinks. He realizes his questionable position and bashfully wraps his arms around himself. Before he can gather himself, she forcibly hands him a cup and smiles as he takes a small sip from it. Next, she coyly requests that he stay for a couple of days to help her harvest the seasonal mountain vegetables. She jumps with joy when he agrees and promises a plethora of vegetables for their meals. Next, she compels him to make her drink from his cup, and then slurps down the liquor in a gulp. As soon as she is done, she squeals in sheer exuberance, and the simple boy assumes her immense love for the seasonal vegetables. To his alarm, she begins to make weird hiccupi sounds, and then, to his horror, she splashes into the water in euphoria. She keeps on expressing her happiness insanely, and he frantically tells her to calm down. Sadai finally realized the vegetables were innocent in all of this, but she giddily keeps on splashing water on him, completely ignoring his pleas. It then dawns on him that she has no tolerance for alcohol. Before he can stop her from drinking any more, she has already passed out, leaning against his chest. His eyes widen in surprise when she murmurs happily in her sleep. At that moment, he realizes that she was never truly excited about the vegetables. What she really wanted was someone to ease her loneliness. Later, he carries her back to her home, gazing at her sleeping face with a gentle smile. Deep down, however, he has no idea what the future has in store for him. When Aika wakes up in the morning, she finds herself in her house. At first, she drowsily looks here and there, and then a pang of panic strikes her as she recalls the previous night. She turns around and finds a terrified Sadai huddled in a corner, staring at an intimidatingly huge bug. Aika is aware that a city boy like him can never get used to such creepy crawlies found only in the countryside. Next, she sheepishly acknowledges the fact of being a huge pain last night, despite having no memory of what happened after she drank sake. He frantically denies having any trouble and praises the sake. Suddenly, her eyes widen in surprise, and she rushes towards a herb. She quickly plucks off a shoot and calls it warabi. Sadai is also astonished to see it in the wild for the very first time. When she terms the partially bloomed warabi edible, he quickly pops it in his mouth to taste it, but as soon as he chomps it, his face winces with discomfort, and he is all sweaty. He clasps his mouth in a frenzy, unable to handle the intense bitterness, but assures himself of its health and beauty benefits. It is then that an amused Aika clarifies that warabi cannot be eaten raw due to its pungent taste. She keeps on chuckling at his haphazardness while he tries to hide his face in sheer embarrassment. Later, while he is filling his basket with veggies, she calls out to him and gestures to him to give her a boost to reach the high-end vegetables. With a flushed face, he carries her so that she can easily reach the koshi-abura. She expresses her gratitude for helping her reach one of the best harvests. After a long round of chores, they settle down for a meal. She is a little apprehensive about whether the simple lunch was sufficient for a towering person like him, but he assures her that he is more than full. He humbly thanks her for providing him with a home-cooked lunch that he has been yearning for ages, but she casually shrugs that off. To Aika, life-changing kindness seemed like a normal Tuesday. Next, he inquires about their evening plans, but she mentions that now they are free as they have collected enough vegetables. A yawn slips out of her mouth as she suggests resting throughout the afternoon. Sadai stares at her in disbelief, as if he had never heard of the word nap. Before he knows, she grabs his hand and pushes him toward herself, cradling his head on her lap. The poor lad is still baffled about that unexpected development, but she gently reminds him having a sleepless night just because of her. She emphasizes the importance of resting one's body after hard work. Upon her insistence, as he forcibly shuts his eyes, his mind is slammed with disturbing flashbacks of his usual afternoon routine, putting him in a state of unrest. He is startled as he feels her soft fingers gently massaging his head. She tries to calm his mind through soothing talk. Gradually, his mind relaxes, and he closes his eyes. In no time, he drifts off to slumberland. She gently removes his glasses and is perturbed to see dark circles under his eyes, making her curious about his past. Those dark circles look like they had their own long and complicated backstory. Quite later, as they head back, she assumes that the day must be quite exhausting for him, but he refuses, claiming to have had a fun-filled experience. He is in for another shocker as she brings him to a comparatively larger house, as the temple is not sufficient for two people to live comfortably. He is awestruck by the house standing in front of him, which was built centuries ago. She mentions that it has been abandoned for 150 years and is the last of the buildings standing here. The house seems quite old and worn out, but it is still livable. As they step inside, Sadai is mesmerized by its well-structured roof made of tightly knitted wooden sticks and large wooden planks for a broader structure. Seeing him in a trance, she adds how it has been occupied by village elders for generations. She recalls a clear memory of when all the villagers gathered to build it and shared their meals together during their work. She smiles dreamily as if living in the memory again. Later, as Sadai settles down for the night, he hears the usual sounds of the forest during the night, but surprisingly, he isn't disturbed by them. After everything he had experienced recently, forest noises barely made the top 10 list of concerns. He compares his current state with his humble city dwelling, where he lacked privacy. He notices the pitch-black darkness outside and wonders about the time on the clock. He fumbles his body and realizes that his phone is not there, and he probably dropped it in his attempt to catch signals. However, he recalls it running completely out of battery, and he wouldn't have been able to recharge it anyway without electricity. He smiles at the irony about how useless a thing becomes that once controlled his whole life. He is certain that his phone must be bombarded with messages from a worried Professor Koshiro, his only well-wisher. He leans his head against the wooden wall with a contented smile and is then instantly alerted by some unusual sounds. Next, he sees a pair of sparkling dots in pitch darkness. With a racing heart, he guesses that some wild animal might be nearby. He panic-strickenly walks towards the entrance to get a clear picture, and then nearly gets a heart attack on seeing 4 gleaming eyes staring at him. As he drops to the ground out of fear, he imagines being surrounded by some mythical creatures. In the same moment, Aika walks through the door and is astonished to find him completely disheveled and sweaty. With tear-stricken eyes, he wonders about her presence. She smiles and proclaims that she just heard him calling out to her. She is curious about his terror-stricken state when he warns her to flee, pointing in the direction of 4 eyes. She quickly raises her lamp to get clarity of that dark corner, and it is revealed that the eyes belong to a badger and her child. Sadai's senses are almost knocked out, but she calmly drives the animals away into the forest. A worn-out Sadai sighs in relief, and she quickly hugs him firmly to comfort him. His eyes welled up, thinking about the recent incident that gave him quite a jump scare. He is unable to understand the reason for his fear when he was so keen to take his life a day before. He lets his tears flow freely, hugging her back tightly. Sometimes a hug explains more than 1,000 complicated thoughts. The next morning, Sadai wakes up and freshens up with water from a nearby basin. The familiar forest sounds of other living things strike his ears, and he realizes that after many years, he is having a morning that he isn't dreading. So when he informs Aika about his plan to stay here for a while, she is a bit surprised. He instantly apologizes for his sudden request and hopes that he is not a trouble to her. Although Aika claims to have no issues, she still appears stunned by his decision. Most guests stay for a night or two. Sadai arrived with long-term plans. He insists that he will help her with various chores, just like a family member. She smiles and warns him to be prepared for a tough life. Last night has not only given him a fear of death, but a reason to live again as well. From now on, he has decided to share her loneliness gradually. As they trot through the fields, she imparts to him the idea of an isolated yet independent mountain life. She warns him again that this life can be grueling for a delicate city man like him, so he must not lose heart in the beginning. Their first task is to collect river water and take it home. She has brought 2 buckets, one for each to hold, but to her surprise, he carries both of them on his broad shoulders and requests her to guide the way. Next, they do laundry, and since she is having difficulty adjusting the high-end rod, Sadai readily comes to her rescue. She expresses her gratitude, but he tells her to leave the high-reach places to him. Being tall was rapidly becoming his most valuable life skill. While collecting firewood, he becomes the handy carrier. For some reason, Aika's heart begins to thump wildly, and her cheeks flush hard. In her bewilderment, she loses her balance and is about to have a fall when he quickly holds her. She quickly composes herself and requests that he return home ahead of her. At first, he is a bit puzzled, then he realizes that she might be having a personal need. As he exits, she instantly drops down on her knees, unable to control her emotions. She has never felt like that since a century and a half ago, and Sadai treating her like a queen is just out of this world for her. She admits to his masculinity despite being a city dweller. Later, when she reaches his place, she finds him feeding the same badger and her child to make up for driving them away last night. She smiles, and then an aromatic fragrance strikes her nostrils. To her immense shock, he points at 2 steaming pots placed on the stove, indicating that dinner is being prepared. He assures her that he is used to cooking for himself, but she restrains him from grinding himself just for her sake. With a serene smile, he assures her that he is really enjoying doing all that work and takes full responsibility for all the chores on his shoulders. A shocked Aika is further taken by storm when he presents her with a steaming cup of tea to wash her fatigue away. She cannot hold her tears anymore and begins to sob hard, overwhelmed with gratitude. This is because she is not aware that he has had a tough life previously, both at home and work. Sadai panics at her sudden outburst and is left speechless when she calls him a good person. As she continues to sniffle, he lies there in a daze, unaware that their simple life together has already begun. Neither of them knew where this was going, but apparently, the mountain had already approved the arrangement. One ordinary day, he is just rummaging through his jacket pockets, and a small wrapped chocolate candy slips out of it. Instantly, his mind drifts off to one of his previous night shifts, when, after an exhausting shift, he dozed off at nearly 4 a.m. He is suddenly awakened by a senior, who lauds his efforts and then suddenly passes him the same small chocolate candy that a girl had given him as a promotional leftover. Along with that, he slams down a fresh stack of papers in front of him and instructs him to finish that by evening. He does a massive favor by sending Sadai for a quick shower for the meeting starting in a couple of hours. Sadai is snapped back from that painful memory by Aika's sniffing sounds. He is taken aback as she tries to smell the chocolate in his hand and appears quite awestruck. It seems as if she has never seen one before, so he offers her to try it. When she appears apprehensive, he opens up the juicy square for her and places it on her hands. She is completely mesmerized by its fragrance and breathes it in as if it were some rare delicacy. To be fair, after 800 years in the mountains, it does qualify as a rare delicacy. Then her tongue slips out from her mouth, and its tip barely touches the candy. To an amused Sadai, she seems like a cautious cat trying something for the first time. The temptation is too strong for her as she quickly pops the square into her mouth, and suddenly her face winces insanely. A panic-stricken Sadai quickly makes her spit out the candy, but she refuses to do so, claiming that it is melting in her mouth. Squeezing his hands tightly, she chews the chocolate, savoring every bit of it, and then finally swallows it down in a big gulp. For a moment, her face turns blank, and then when she normalizes, he inquires about her weird reaction. She gloomily releases his hands and drops to her knees, complaining that the candy just disappeared in her mouth. A smile forms on his lips, and then he bursts into a fit of laughter. She is offended at his comic outburst since she feels the candy disappearing act is a real serious issue. Then, quite melancholically, she describes the magical experience of having that melt-in-mouth confectionery. Still chuckling hard, he promises to bring a lot of them for her the next time. For Sadai, life has become beautiful since even trivial happenings turn into magical experiences while living with Aika. Meanwhile, back in the capital city, Kurihara is shocked to see hateful and threatening graffiti spewed all over Sadai's apartment door. While Mountain Life was busy healing Sadai, the city clearly had other plans. The next day, when Aika comes to call him for supper, she is shocked to find him nowhere inside his house. Then her gaze falls on a piece of paper lying on the table, which he has instructed her not to look for him. A panic-stricken Aika rushes towards the open field, only to find some clothes drying on the line, which are possibly his. She suddenly turns towards the washing area and finds him standing there. Both squeal in sheer embarrassment as their gazes meet. Neither of them was emotionally prepared for this surprise inspection. Later that night, he is still hiding his face as she apologetically takes his measurements. It completely slipped out of her mind that he might need a change of clothes since he came empty-handed, but Sadai is too ashamed to show his face to her, so she tells him to snap out of it since she is used to such dare-bear shows. An astonished Sadai finally puts his hands away and learns that she is accustomed to seeing babies growing up and passing away in front of her. Relaxed, he finally turns around on her request, and she measures his back by using a string. Deep down, it dawns on him that Aika's feelings might not be that intense, like his, since she is accustomed to men for centuries and is definitely more mature than him. On her instruction, he raises his arms sideways, and his eyes pop out when she hugs him from behind. However, from his view, he can see two hands trying to measure his waist, and that is enough to make his heart pound fiercely. Thankfully, the measurement process is done. Later, as they settle down opposite each other, Aika begins sewing his clothes while he watches her. Sadai's heart was working much harder than the actual tailoring process. He envies her confidence and finds himself more self-conscious around her. Suddenly, she yelps in pain from pricking her finger on the needle, being out of practice for a while. Sadai dozes off in a sitting position and gains consciousness as the sun rays strike his face. He finds a beaming Aika sitting in the same position and frantically apologizes for his recklessness. It is revealed that she has been up the whole night watching him and sewing his clothes. She shows him his new set of traditional clothes, which fit him perfectly like a glove. He squeals in delight, lauding her efforts. He hugs himself fondly, expressing amazement at her quick service. She smiles in satisfaction, relieved that her skills haven't rusted yet. She stretches herself in exhaustion and requests that he prepare breakfast for them. He readily agrees to do so and rushes outside. His heart is dancing with joy at the thought that someone actually was up the whole night for him. Despite his tall stature, he finds himself a mere child in front of her, who seems older and wiser. Meanwhile, Aika's face lights up with a beam of satisfaction as she recalls covering him when he unconsciously dozed off, and also when she hugged him during the measurement process. She cannot believe that, despite her age, her heart is still that of a young maiden, which races on such trivial matters. She has been up the whole night just to watch him sleep. However, both are reluctant to show their real feelings to each other. At this point, everyone knew what was happening except the two people involved. On one of their usual harvesting trips, Aika remembers stopping by a cave up ahead for an errand. Sadai readily agrees but cannot help being curious. Soon, they reach the opening of a remote-looking cave. She enters it easily, while the lanky lad has to stoop a little to fit the entrance. He looks around curiously at the neatly arranged barrels and clay pots. To him, the place seems like a cold store since it is unusually chilly inside. He learns that the cold wind from the inner sanctuary keeps the place comfortably cold during summers as well, and hence, a suitable place to store perishable items. As he delves further, he comes across another opening leading to an inner altar, loosely barred by strings. Just on the side is a large figurine showing tentacles holding a crystal ball. As he peeks into the opening, he is startled to see a huge place with an underground frozen lake. Sadai smiles in amazement as the mystery of the natural cold store unfolds before him. Aika requests him to fetch some pickles and meat from the barrels. He readily obliges, and in the meantime, she tries to reach the barrel on the topmost shelf. Unfortunately, she loses her balance, and there is a sickening crash followed by her agonizing scream. A terror-stricken Sadai rushes towards her, and is horrified to see her lying unconscious on the ground in a pool of what seems blood. The situation escalated from grocery shopping to absolute panic in record time. He lets out a spine-chilling scream and tries to awaken her. He instantly carries her and runs outside, completely clueless about how to seek help. He is so scared that he loses his mind with all sorts of terrifying thoughts invading him. He frantically tries to remember the location of the nearest hospital to get her instant medical care. Rivers begin to flow down his cheeks on the thought of losing her, and he begins to run blindly. In his chaotic state of mind, he doesn't realize that Aika is already conscious and doesn't hear her pleas to stop running. Finally, she has no option but to gnaw his ear, and struck with immense shock, he drops to the ground, putting the emergency brakes on his madness. He stares at her, completely disheveled, so she tries to calm down his nerves by assuring him of her well-being. Tear-strickenly, he points at her blood-covered body, but then he learns that the red liquid is sake and not blood. The following night, while slurping sake from his cup, he relishes its fruity flavor. He still cannot believe that he mistook its deep red color for blood. She describes it as a top-tier one, especially reserved for festivals, and it is made with Japanese blueberries. When he appears apprehensive about having it on an ordinary day, she reveals that festivals have been reduced to memories for centuries, so she thought to treat him with something special. Guilt-free, he begins to enjoy the aged luxurious wine, but realizes that she is not having it. It turns out that she doesn't drink that on ordinary days. After the previous alcohol incident, this was probably a wise policy. Also, she expresses her intention to spend the night mending his sandals. He is pushed towards remorse again, but she quickly pulls him out by lauding his thoughtfulness. But no matter how soothing her words are, his heart is heavy thinking about the possibility of a real-life emergency and his ability to deal with it effectively. He knows that he will fail to handle it, but for the time being, he drowns his woes in wine and meat. That day, both Aika and Sadai have been forced to stay indoors due to the continuous drizzle since last night. Sadai has nothing to do after the usual chores, so he just watches her smoke her pipe leisurely. While sipping from his cup, he is unable to keep his eyes off her saucy appearance despite being centuries old. Aika notices his uneasiness and invites him to take the heavenly puff. He frantically refuses to do so, having low resistance to tobacco. Sadai could survive mountain life, but a single puff still felt like a dangerous challenge. But she explains that she is smoking homegrown incense instead of tobacco. On her mention, he realizes that the fragrance is very pleasant. She emphasizes that she smokes to have a lingering fragrance around her instead of harmful tobacco. Next, she lists a couple of advantages a soothing fragrance can bring to oneself, and then takes a deep whiff, basking in her memories of past festivals, friendly villagers, and a dear husband. He guesses that she wants those memories around her forever in the form of that fragrance. She feels the intensity of his gaze on her and senses that, finally, her speech has made an impact. But he still shows reluctance to inhale anything shady. She luringly presents the pipe towards him, resulting in his surrender. He hesitantly inspects the thin pipe, his face sweating hard, when suddenly someone barges inside. The strange woman pants hard and then collapses on the ground. A panicked Sadai rushes towards her and tries to bring her to consciousness. The disheveled woman is completely shocked to see him, and it is revealed that she is no other than Kurihara. She begins to cry on finding him alive and then, in a fit of emotion, throws herself on him. Meanwhile, Sadai is flabbergasted at her sudden arrival while Aika watches Kurihara's outburst in sheer confusion. Aika looked away for 1 minute, and suddenly, there was another emotional visitor in the house. Between hysterical sobs, Kurihara explains how she was able to track him by asking someone to trace his phone's GPS. She describes the peril she faced just to find him and then bursts into a deafening sob. Quite politely, he inquires about the reason for her visit, and for a moment, Kurihara stops crying. With a puffed-up face, she explains that she came to look for him. She narrates the story about Professor Koshiro's sudden call, and then how she got to read Sadai's suicide note. After a momentary silence, Aika expresses her wish to know Kurihara, and a shaken Sadai begins to introduce Kurihara when she suddenly interrupts and expectantly asks him to return. He is taken aback by her sudden proposition and begins to stutter. It is then that Aika comes to his rescue and warns her of the dangers of slippery, mountain roads after rain. Kurihara is thoroughly shocked and angrily snatches away her incense pipe, thinking of her as a minor. The situation escalated from introductions to pipe confiscation in record time. Sadai snaps out of the daze, instantly restrains Kurihara, and drags her away for a private talk. In the next instant, both are found in his house with Sadai telling Kurihara about Aika. Kurihara is doubtful about Aika's story and worries that he has been duped again. He frantically tries to deny that, but she reminds him of how everyone took advantage of his soft nature back then, and then he was left empty-handed. She appears genuinely concerned about him, but Sadai rectifies her misconception about Aika. However, Kurihara is not ready to listen and suggests meeting Professor Koshiro with her. Her insistence makes him surrender to her immense delight. Later, dinner is served, and as predicted, Kurihara remarks about the odd food contents. Sadai then tells her about the mountain vegetables and especially the tree sprout koshiabura. Thankfully, she finds the food quite tasty. Next, she is served the special sake from the cold cave, and she just finds it magical. Aika is glad that their guest is enjoying her time. She readily suggests that Kurihara take a refreshing dip in the nearby hot spring. An excited Kurihara readily agrees and trots away, carrying a towel and a lamp. Finding solace, he nervously apologizes to Aika, but she claims to have enjoyed Kurihara's company. It is then that she expresses her curiosity about their relationship, so he clarifies that they were university fellows in the past, but the smart woman doesn't buy that, as someone actually took the trouble to look for him in the mountains. University fellow is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, and nobody is convinced. Next, she lists down Kurihara's qualities, and especially her tightly fitted skirt, which caught her eye. But he claims to like Aika's dressing more since it is soft and simple, having a historical touch to it. He keeps on praising her, leaving her completely speechless. But then he realizes what he just blabbered in front of her and jumps back hysterically. Aika giggles bashfully, while poor Sadai frantically hides his face. A delighted Aika keeps on chuckling. Meanwhile, Kurihara is having the time of her life in the spring and seems quite impressed with the simple village life. The next morning, Sadai and the cheerful Kurihara begin their journey back. Sadai feels deeply grateful to Aika for her kindness and the parting gift she gave them. After seeing them off, Aika returns to her empty house with a blank expression and quietly sits down, reflecting on the events of the past. The house went from chaotic to silent in record time, like it forgot how noise worked. Last night, she was awakened by the sound of footsteps and found Sadai sitting all alone on a tree log in an eerie graveyard. When she approached him, She expressed astonishment to find him awake at that hour, since the next day was his departure. She still didn't get his point of finding comfort among the stone-cold graves. In response, he opened his bag and took out a carrier wrapped in cloth, claiming that it contained his mother's ashes. He suddenly wanted to tell her the reason for his intention to end his life, and when she encouraged him by sitting beside him, he unfolded his past before her. In his childhood, Sadai's family got indebted, but his father abandoned them when his business went bankrupt. So the burden of 8 million yen fell on the fragile shoulders of a poor mother and her child. The duo fought the odds for the payoff and, at the same time, tried to live a normal life. Some childhoods come with emotional baggage. His came with financial baggage too. For him, debt wasn't the reason to commit suicide because his mother was always there for him, working side by side, but it socially isolated him. He recalled his wonderful mother, who had tried her best to give him a comfortable life and always had a positive demeanor. Still, life played the cruel card, and his mother passed away in an accident 3 years ago. At present, Ayaka's heart pains to see a grief-stricken Sadai crying bitterly, who seemed to have given up on everything before. She places her hand on his shoulder to console him, because she knows how painful it is to be alone. Her soothing words make him weep more openly and loudly. After composing himself, he admits that she was the one who rejuvenated him when he had completely given up hope. He expresses his desire to firmly linger on that hope of meeting her again to continue his life. He is certain that he will miss the simple mountain life that he is leaving behind and will be back to live with her. She smiles blushingly and then holds his hand in assurance. She promises that she will wait for him and will always think about him. Overcome with emotion, his lips begin to quiver and his eyes well up again, and in the next instant, two lovers can be seen getting closer, making lifelong vows. The next morning, before parting, he leaves his jacket with her to keep as a reminder of his return, no matter how much time it takes. A perplexed Aika stares at the jacket and then requests that he return before his scent fades away from the jacket, since she will be waiting for him desperately. At first, he is stunned, but then he waves to her, promising to return ASAP. The jacket now officially had emotional custody assigned to it. 3 days pass, and Aika can be seen napping on the ledge outside his house, when out of the blue, someone steps in, startling the house animals, and then places a bag of chocolates near her nostrils. Instantly, she wakes up, rubbing her eyes, and finds a suave and refined Sadai watching over her with a smile. He mentions that he came back as soon as he could, and Aika gives him a big welcome. While merrily munching on the chocolates, she expresses disbelief at his swift return. Sadai gives the whole credit to Kurihara and Professor Koshiro. Aika is surprised to hear about the other person since he has never mentioned him before. Sadai respectfully terms him as his mentor and looks up to him. Aika is delighted to hear that. The story unfolds in a flashback when Sadai met the professor with Kurihara. The fretful professor instantly embraced him upon his entrance and then scolded him for being so reckless. He ruefully emphasized the pain he and his wife went through upon reading his ridiculous letter. He believed that he should have come to him if something was bothering him before making such a dreadful decision, which would have left a negative impact on an elderly person like him. Sadai's head droops in shame, and then he bursts into tears while narrating his sorrows to him. The professor handled emotional crisis like it was a mix of discipline and mild panic. Kurihara comes to his support by showing the professor a picture of the hateful graffiti on Sadai's apartment door. The professor is greatly amused, and then both he and Kurihara exchange meaningful glances and cryptic smiles. He instructs Sadai to meet him the next day at the same time for a nice surprise. A baffled Sadai obliges. The next day, a beaming professor presents him with an envelope and breaks the good news that his debt of 4 million has been paid, and now he has to pay only 2 million. Sadai appears thunderstruck at the turn of events when Kurihara proclaims graffiti to be illegal. She lists down the penalties one has to face if involved in an offensive act like this. A bemused professor then recounts having a long, peaceful talk with the troublemakers, and then the matter was quickly resolved. Apparently, a long, peaceful talk is professor code for professional-level persuasion. The following night, while walking down the road with Kurihara, he expresses his gratitude for her immense support. Kurihara refuses to take the credit and commends the professor for his brilliance. He is still in a state of disbelief, but cannot help but wonder about Kurihara's immense kindness towards him. A shadow crosses her face as she recalls her freshman year when she accidentally dropped her assignment from the 3rd floor. All her hard work was strewn everywhere, and everyone just stood and watched except Sadai, who readily came to help the miserable girl. For some reason, the memory is wiped from Sadai's mind, but Kurihara was forever indebted to him. She always wanted to approach him, but he kept his distance from everyone, and now she feels honored as finally her wish is granted. Next, she expresses curiosity about how he will be paying off his remaining debt. When life gives you debt relief, it still keeps a subscription plan active. It occurs to him that he has to do something about it, and then he remembers Aika's souvenir box. He opens it and finds something very cryptic inside. The duo makes different guesses while staring at the odd little fragment, and then its fragrance strikes his nostrils, which seems strangely familiar to him. Kurihara's eyes twinkle in excitement, thinking that he might have found his way to the remaining payoff. She suggests showing it to the professor to know its real worth. Later, the professor takes a good look at it and guesses it to be some kind of mineral or a fossilized matter like amber. He decides to take it to the research department for a more thorough analysis. The snooty guy at the research department refuses to look at it on short notice, despite the professor's polite insistence. Out of the blue, the professor puts his arm around him, threatening to reveal his secret about keeping a little bunny hidden. The panicked man begins to sweat hard and promises to deliver the results the next day. The professor lets out a merry smile. The next day, it turns out that the little fragment is called kuboku, a fragrant piece of wood used to make incense. The man describes in detail kuboku's composition and properties and concludes that more than a mineral, it is solidified oil. But strangely, this piece has other unknown substances amalgamated and can be termed as extraterrestrial. The man then offers to buy the piece from Sadai on behalf of the university, and luckily proposes 2 million yen for it. Sadai's mouth drops open in sheer shock because, to the naked eye, the precious fragment seems like an ordinary rock. Kurihara squeals in triumph while Sadai is left thunderstruck. Later, while sipping coffee with Kurihara, she offers to help him search for a job in her company, but he politely refuses as he intends to go back to the mountain. Kurihara appears stunned, but then smiles understandingly because back then she was on a guilt trip for forcibly dragging him to the city. However, his mind has certainly changed about a permanently isolated life on the mountain. This is because he finds himself incapable of protecting her. In fact, he is grateful to Kurihara for bringing him back home. He stands up and bows to her in full gratitude, but a bashful Kurihara, in turn, thanks him for helping her and looks forward to his cooperation in the future as well. With that, he takes his leave and disappears amidst the crowd. A perturbed Kurihara watches him with a racing heart and wonders whether he actually means what he is saying because to her, he seems madly in love with Akka. Meanwhile, assumptions about love triangles continue operating at full power. At present, Aika has already gobbled down all the candy while listening to the interesting recount of his city visit. She is delighted to hear about the fortunate turn of events for him. Meanwhile, Sadai is taken aback by the amazing origami she is unconsciously creating from the candy wrappers. He gives credit to his kind friends and expresses his gratitude to her for awarding him with a bountiful souvenir. Next, he mentions the precious kuboku that she presented him, which he accepted without knowing its worth. He insists on giving her full payment for that bit by bit, but she refuses to accept that by carelessly calling it a mere piece of wood. However, she emphasizes that it was the blessing of the ukami for making him debt-free. In their economy, emotional value keeps outperforming monetary value. Blushing hard, Sadai bows in front of her again, so she calls herself fortunate for receiving this fantastic chocolate in return for a piece of wood. She pops one in and is mesmerized by its magic. He remembers that along with this chocolate, he has brought her another gift. In no time, he brings inside a huge beanbag, hesitant whether it will fit her remote lifestyle. A stunned Aika checks it out curiously, wondering whether something is inside the bag. She is more astonished when he describes it as a soft chair suitable for her to do chores instead of sitting on the floor. She pokes at it apprehensively, making him wonder whether she actually fancies it. She still cannot digest the fact about how one can sit on furniture so mushy. Finally, she gears up to try it and then jumps back to settle down on the beanbag. Due to her first attempt, she falls deep into the chair, unable to keep her balance due to being so lightweight. The beanbag won the first round effortlessly. A panic-stricken Sadai gets a jump scare watching her being swallowed by the giant beanbag. The hilarious endeavor continues for an hour, and after that, Aika can be seen dozing off peacefully on the bag. She is completely in awe of the city dwellers for inventing such wondrous things. She is bewitched by the bag's charm and hugs it lovingly. Sadai watches her with satisfaction at quickly getting used to it. She delightfully rolls over, lying flat on her back, feeling relaxed. She bounces merrily in it as if swimming in a pool, thinking how lucky she is to get such a jewel in exchange for a splinter. The trade value of reality in this story is extremely unstable. It suddenly strikes Sadai that he has experienced a similar fragrance of kuboku somewhere. He emphasizes the extinctiveness of the wood just like the university claimed it to be, and promises to buy it back to return it to her. To his astonishment, she pulls him by her side on the bag and stares intensely in his eyes. She insists once more on that splinter being useless to her and that all she wants is him by her side always. They hold hands, and their gazes lock into each other when suddenly, the badger jumps between them, causing a rude interruption. The duo giggles as the badger fiddles with the bag playfully. Even emotional climaxes in this household require wildlife approval. Meanwhile, Kuboku's importance to the village and Aika is still unknown to Sadai. One fine morning, Aika is coyly combing her long mane, and then Kurihara's well-maintained demeanor flashes into her mind. She consciously checks her own appearance in the mirror from every angle. Her face flushes hard as she realizes she is acting like a teen girl. She reaches Sadai's place and checks whether he is awake so they can have some breakfast. He cheerfully greets her, and it appears that he has already started the day's work. She sees many wooden dividers, called shuji screens, lying on the floor and guesses he might be replacing their paper. He agrees since he has brought fresh paper on his way back just to maintain the house that will be his home for a while. Aika is impressed by his hard work and is certain that villagers would have been proud of that. As he uprights the empty screens one by one, Aika immediately offers to help. In between, he runs out of glue, and he still has a lot of screens to cover. He is planning to make another city trip to get some when she suggests preparing a homemade one with rice. In no time, a pot is bubbling with some rice and water, and after it has cooked well, she mashes the mixture in a mortar. When life runs out of glue, the countryside responds with a full culinary solution. She makes sure that it is completely blended, then adds a pinch of salt and some sake. To his delight, the homemade glue is ready to use. They quickly decide to finish off the rest of the screens. She helps him spread the paper neatly over a wooden frame, and then he sticks them together by using the glue. After a lot of hard work, they are finally done and leave the prepared screens for overnight drying. Next, she runs to prepare a brunch for them and plans to have the rest of the day off. She suddenly turns around, peers at him, and then requests that he stoop a little in front of her. When he obliges, she tries to wipe off some glue stuck to his face. While doing that, her hand accidentally gets glued to his, and the whole situation makes him remark whether they are stuck for life. A speechless Aika flushes hard and then quickly turns around to dip their hands in warm water to get rid of the annoying glue. As their clasped hands dip in a barrel of warm water, they finally get detached after a while, bringing a melancholic shadow to their faces. She quickly composes herself and rushes to prepare breakfast, leaving him thoughtful. It occurs to him whether she was uncomfortable with their hands sticking together, but then he shrugs off the thought and dashes after her. Emotional detachment was achieved faster than physical detachment. On the other hand, a bashful Aika admits to her annoying juvenile behavior. In the next instance, the duo can be seen padding fields, which seems like quite a grinding chore. Finally, they have finished planting daikon and cannot wait to have it before summer. By looking at his rustic appearance, Sadai seems to have completely blended with the mountain lifestyle and breathes in the smell of freshly dug earth. He has officially upgraded from city worker to professional dirt enthusiast. His excitement baffles Aika, almost certain that she can never stand a place where one hasn't experienced that smell before. Then he mentions his intention to send a letter to both Professor Koshiro and Kurihara, informing them about his well-being, having no digital method to do so. She requests that he mention her regards for them as well. Next, he inquires about their current address, and she assures him that writing Kafuni village of Mount Hizeraha will be sufficient. Later, he trots down the mountain path, running deep into the forest. In between his journey, he takes several hydration breaks and heaves a sigh of relief upon reaching the town boundary. He calculates that he has been walking for 2 hours to reach the main road, following animal trails. GPS was replaced by trusting local wildlife routing. At a distance, he finds an old woman praying intently and guesses her to be a town dweller. He is surprised to see that and wonders whether she is praying to the mountain's Ukami. His eyes are wide open upon spotting a neatly wrapped familiar piece of clothing in the offering box. As he predicted, it turns out to be one of the dresses that Aika usually wears. He is completely taken aback and swiftly slips it inside his jacket. He is completely unaware that a young girl has already caught him up in that act and condemns it. But still, she is curious about the weirdo that she has never seen before.